I guess I'll just introduce everything or like the basis of this video. So
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
this video is basically just to start a conversation about everything's going on with the Black Lives movement and what happened to George Floyd and all the protests that started and everything. Um, this video is going to be monetized, and all the ad revenue made from this video will be donated to funds. I haven't decided quite yet, but I'll put it in the beginning of this video of what foundation that I will be or we will be donating. So all the ad revenue from this video will be donated to that. I'll put like a little title card in. But so yeah, that's like the basis of this video. So please share as much as possible. So I guess if you guys want to introduce yourselves now.
Yeah, my name is Titus Oldham. I have a podcast called Tunes for Two, and I frequently collaborate with these guys as much as possible. And I lived in Egypt for 7 years. That's an important thing. So
Do I want me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Anything else?
Yeah.
All right. My name's Josh. I don't have anything to plug. um, yeah, like I'm just like a guy, and I'm also I don't know what else to like say.
Well, I guess that's it. Like
yeah,
Okay,
Titus and Josh. That's our
Yeah.
names.
that's all you
Titus and
need to
Josh.
know.
Yeah, that's all you
Yeah.
need to know.
Uh-huh.
All right. So I guess let's start this conversation.
So first things first, how hard it is to start a conversation about these type of things. I remember when I was first becoming aware of the Black Lives Matter movement, I was still in Egypt. And not that there like isn't racism in Egypt, because there definitely is, especially against like Sudanese refugees. But I lived in my own little like privileged bubble, so I didn't really like think about it much. And I saw like Black Lives Matter back in like middle school, and because of like what I was used to of like, you know, people in the Middle East being discriminated against and literally being killed in the Middle East, I was like, whoa, well, all lives matter. I was on that train for a bit back in like middle school, the whole all lives matter thing. And then, you know, after a while I got educated and people were like, yo, shut the fuck up. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And I started to understand better, especially now that I'm in America and like I started visiting America more. I was like, okay, now like my eyes were opening to that sort of injustice. And it still wasn't easy to start the conversation, especially with people like my family, because my uncle was a cop and he was getting very defensive about it because that's who we were staying with when we were visiting America. And yeah, a majority of my family is white Christian, you know, living in a very like privileged bubble, I would say. I feel like everyone within my family has slowly come around to open their eyes to this sort of thing, but still very hard to start that conversation. So I think stuff like this, even if it's starting with your friends, is good. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also like growing up, I was always like, as an African American, I grew up in an area populated heavily by white people and people that did not look like me. So it was very hard to start conversations like this because I always felt like I had to mute myself or tone myself down in order to like assimilate. That's like, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but in order to fit in, it was like I had to hide my own blackness. So in that regard, it was always difficult for me myself to start a conversation because I didn't want to be that one person that was like, I don't know, in a way it felt wrong to advocate for myself or to discuss the struggles that my own people were going through because I was the only one who could speak for the experience of an entire group of people. And in that aspect, it's hard to start a conversation. it's also hard because like I think people just don't want to rock the boat. You know, like people like hate stirring the pot. A lot of people don't like getting political about things, especially in school. And there's so many different viewpoints and ignorant beliefs, and it's hard to have a productive, healthy, conducive conversation in any setting unless it's extremely controlled. It's just very difficult. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I just feel like I'm like really uneducated on this topic, and I just felt like even if I tried to start a conversation, I always had that fear of like saying the wrong thing that I shouldn't be saying, even though wasn't trying to say that. Like I would like
Yeah.
accidentally slip up, and then I was always afraid of that slip up, so I didn't really like want to try to start that conversation. And I just felt like I was uneducated as well. But I feel like I just needed to like wake up to it and start like educating myself so I wouldn't be as afraid as like messing up, because like if I do mess up like accidentally, then that's me learning from that experience and like not to tread more carefully and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, like I was kind of like even more like I still am but ignorant, but what kind of like brought me to light was the whole like Colin Kaepernick thing that happened a few years ago. I didn't really understand why he was kneeling until like a couple weeks, actually until like the beginning of this year. Well, I mean, I knew it was for like police brutality and stuff, but I just didn't like fully understand it, and I still don't fully understand, but I feel like I understand it a little bit more. But that's kind of when I woke up to, or opened up my eyes to everything, because for what he was actually kneeling for, and it wasn't for disrespect to the flag or anything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And like I think like what you were talking about, Caleb, speaks to a different issue when trying to start a conversation, because it's like people hold this belief, right, that like if you're going to start a conversation about events that are happening to an oppressed minority, the people that have to start the conversation is the people who are being oppressed, and that the only people who should be leading those conversations is the affected party. And on a level, yes, that's true, but you're never going to create actual change if the only people who are willing to speak on it is the people who are being affected, right? It has to come from everyone. It has to come from all sides, right? Everyone has to be allowed to have an input and to contribute to the conversation. Like it can't just be dominated by one group of people.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I was always very apathetic because I was like, I don't know anything about like anything. Like I stayed out of politics as much as I can. I stayed out of like human rights things as much as I could. Even though like I was in a region that like, you know, so much human rights things were being like, you know, just like manipulated, stuff like that. And like I feel like not the only time, but the first time I really started waking up to that sort of thing was when Trump won presidency, because everyone at my school, like we see America like as an outside perspective, but even over there, we were like, there's no way that guy becomes president, you know? And then when he did, like even my school was silent. It's an American school, but like we're still mostly an international community. But even we were like, oh my gosh, that's a big deal. And so after that is like the more things I started doing to like shake things up, you know, it woke me up more. And then coming to America, I was like, you know, I was in the battleground of basically where that was all going on. I was like, being in the middle of it really wakes you up, especially.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And it's like I was so apathetic because, you know, I was on an outside perspective, you know, I wasn't in the middle of it, but like it affects everyone at a large scale if you don't stop it from like the roots of it, you know. Exactly. And so Yeah, I mean, the thing about calling Kaepernick as well, like that was the roots of like his, movement, and people were trying to silence him and make him conform to like, patriotic American standards. And now that, we did that was a polite way of doing it, like very polite way of doing it. And now that shit still hasn't changed for the better, rioting starts, stuff like that, and people are like, whoa, violence is not the answer. It's like, people tried to be polite about it, people tried to do the like, non-violent thing, but you shut everyone down. Anyone who even took the side of calling Kaepernick was shut down. It doesn't matter if you're black or white or anyone. So that's why it's important for everyone, regardless of race, to like, lift up the voices of the people who are being most affected and also contribute to the conversation.
I didn't really understand why people. Well, I mean, I knew why people found it disrespectful to the flag and stuff. I guess I could get it.
Hi, how are you? Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, but like, Colin Kaepernick was taking like a knee, but like that was like the most like undisrespectful way of doing it, because he could have just sat on the bench. Like usually when an injury happens in football, everyone, like all the teammates, takes a knee out of respect for the guy who's injured. So Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee as in a respectful way of doing it. So like, I don't know, like, yeah, I just felt like he did it in a very respectful way, and it was during the night.
Yeah, and think about it, when else during a game are you really going to take a knee for like that sort of position anyways, like while you're standing around while like, that song is going on. That's a good time. And it's not, I don't get why it's so disrespectful. Only people in America, from what I've seen, think of that as a disrespectful, unpatriotic stance. Like everywhere else in the world, if something like that happened, it's just like, it's whatever. Maybe other authoritarian places like, I don't know, Russia, China might take it as a disgrace, but like America sees it. America sees itself as very unauthoritarian, and yet they try to get people to conform like that, and it's just like, it makes no sense.
Like I just find it most disrespectful thing that you could possibly do. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, it's fine. Sorry. I just want to say, y'all, if I'm moving around a lot, it's because I'm outside and there's a lot of bugs out here. And it's just, they come near me and I have to shoo them away. And I feel like bugs like are more intelligent than we think, and they like hold like revenge against me. So I'm just afraid they're like gonna come back and attack me. But that's a little sidebar. No, but like, all right, now here's the thing. I forgot like what I was gonna say. No, give me a second.
Okay.
I got you.
Oh yeah. Okay, so like the whole flag thing, right? Like, I don't understand like what you were saying, Titus. I don't understand why people get angry over that, because the Pledge of Allegiance is, if you think about it, like the fact that they made us stand for that in school every day. I mean, you didn't do it, Titus, but like Caleb,
in elementary school.
Yeah, they like indoctrinating us into like America, like I don't know. And the whole Pledge of Allegiance, justice for all, like, no, there isn't justice for all. The Pledge of Allegiance is a lie. So why would I stand for a country that doesn't stand for me? You know what I'm saying? And that's why I don't understand how people can fight against that, right? Because it's like you're speaking on something that you don't even understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, something that Caleb was saying earlier is like he never wanted to talk because he felt uneducated. And I feel like that's very true. I feel like it's especially the more ignorant people, or like the devil's advocates, who like have the statistic ready to shut any argument down. You know? Like whatever statistic they need. They don't even like consider any contextual like whatever, or like look at all the stats or like all the information. They just have this one stance that they're too stubborn to let go.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they look for whatever like statistic they need to shut down any argument, because that's what
Exactly.
authoritarianism is. That's what conformity is. And
Yeah.
so basically, like, that's why it's important for all of us to like get ahead of that curve and be more educated than those people and look at all the information, look at every side,
Mhm.
so that we can develop our counter arguments,
Yeah.
and maybe eventually, like, one by one, like, it's not going to be easy, definitely, to get those people to change sides, because, like, it's very rooted in their, like, personality
Belief
to be that,
system, yeah.
especially coming from, like, very Christian suburban Alabama like myself. Like, I also had, like, pretty ignorant stances like that, and it's not easy to get rid of those, but, like, eventually, you start the trend, and you keep the momentum, and eventually,
Mhm.
we can do it. Like, it's not impossible. And so I guess we should start talking about, like, specifically events of this week. Starting with George Floyd.
Yes.
Well, actually, wasn't Ahmaud Arbery first?
I'm not sure. I think it was.
I
I'm not
think
sure.
I think it was like a week before George Floyd. I someone like search it up while I talk, but a week before George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery was killed by his like own like neighbors or like people within his community. So it's not just a police brutality thing. It's just like a human thing, or
Right, yeah.
thing where like racism is like, so it's still there. They try to tell us that, like, equal rights ever since like civil rights with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, like ever since those days, like racism is gone. Like everyone has your rights now. You don't have to be so mad anymore. But it's institutionalized now, and like it's still prevalent. And so with Ahmaud Arbery, like that shook things up. It didn't start like what we see now yet, but when
Yeah.
George Floyd, the 8 minutes and 43 seconds where the man was kneeling on his neck, like that was vivid. And like the fact that we got that video especially was very integral to the fact that we have these protests now, because you have the story and like it shakes people up and makes people angry, but that video was like very important for people to like really understand how police brutality is
Yeah.
still like they don't have consequences anymore. And the fact that like I saw a tweet one time this week that was saying that the phone camera has done more protecting of the black community than any cop. That the phone camera, and that's what happened here, is like, even though George Floyd still was murdered on the street, people became aware about it, and the 4 people were eventually charged. And that's only because of the phone camera. Imagine if that video wasn't taken.
Yeah.
Maybe a cop would have spoken up against Derek Chauvin about the 8 minutes 43 seconds. Maybe. It's not likely, because that's just the way it is in police departments. They don't talk about it. They don't speak up against one another. That's how the culture is.
Mm-hmm.
And like maybe Derek Chauvin would have been like suspended if it wasn't for that video. If it wasn't for that video, maybe Derek Chauvin would have been suspended at like maximum. And it was all about not writing, like it was like writing a bad check, which isn't true. It wasn't even George Floyd who wrote the bad check. Like it was just,
It was for nothing.
yeah, it was just stereotyping basically.
Yeah.
So that's where it all sparked from, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously
And
all the other cases in the past as well. Like it keeps building up. The more it gets ignored, the more the aggression
builds up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like what you were saying before, Titus, like it's very easy to dismiss racism in this country because it's not overt anymore, right? Like it was a lot easier in the 1800s, right, when we were literally shackled and treated as three-fifths of a human being, and in the early 1900s, where we were literally segregated and not allowed to inhabit the same spaces, as fellow humans, the racism we see today is systemic. It's invisible. It works beneath the surface. So like you could call it out, but there's nothing, there's no target to aim at, right? It's like you're shooting in the dark. And that's what makes it so dangerous, and what allows stuff like this to keep happening, right? Because it's like you can, like, the Black Lives Matter movement kicked off in what, 2014, 2016, and after that it's like nothing, but people kept dying, and you didn't hear anything, right? Nothing happened, nothing changed, because this like, it's ingrained so deep in the systems that operate and control this country, that like it's so messed up, right? Like, these things shouldn't be happening, but they are, right? And I like watching that video of George Floyd was one of the most haunting things I've ever seen in my entire life, because I watch that video and I see myself, right, like on the ground. Like, it's just like, it's been difficult to process the past week or the past 2 weeks, because I'm almost trying to accept the fact that, like, at the end of the day, like, my life doesn't matter. Like, my life is ultimately worth less than the people around me. And it's a shitty feeling. Like, I don't know how to express it, because the feeling is so profound. But, and I know it's not just me, it's every Black person across America feels this way, right? Like, this powerlessness, it's like your own humanity has been taken away from you. And it's just, I don't know, it's like, am I like, am I gonna be another statistic, right, in the future? Like, I don't know. This is my way of experiencing the world is completely different now.
Yeah,
But,
that's why it's so important that we do say their names, the victims' names, is because we don't want them to be another statistic. So long has the government treated the Black community like just another statistic, you know? That's how Donald Trump treats them. And like, the way I see it is like, about the like systemic and institutionalized racism is like, yeah, like equal rights and all of that are now in effect, but now it's so much easier to use that as an excuse, you know? It's so much easier to cover up the blatant racism that's around us. It's just like, oh, but America isn't racist. We had a Black president. But also Trayvon Martin happened where we had a Black president, you know? And it's like they keep bringing up all these things like, you know, the Black community has equal access to everything, you know? White privilege doesn't exist. But it's just, you know, it's so easy to cover it up. And like, even Donald Trump, he has the audacity to tweet out that he's done more for the Black community than any president since Abraham Lincoln.
That's a load of horse.
Right?
You know what? Oh my God.
He tweeted it out like a couple of days ago, and like people were fucking angry about it, obviously, as like every one of his tweets gets that same reaction, but like especially this one in the midst of this, and the fact that he keeps using George Floyd's name to like, you know, it's just like to gain sympathy from people. I don't know, like he refuses to say Black Lives Matter, and yet he's like, George Floyd would be proud of the better employment numbers that we have in America. It's like he literally said that
Like,
during his speech.
It's just tone deaf. Like, it's just like like any like normal person just like doesn't say those things. You know what I'm saying? It's just...
And like the only reason why I'm aware of like the tone deafness and like all these other things like we've been saying is because like I've been trying more to listen to the Black community and Black artists and stuff like that. And like I've been really, trying to do like my research and like watch documentaries. Like I've been trying to do as much as I can, because at the end of the day, if I was just to walk around blindly, not look to those resources, I wouldn't see it either. I admit to that. I wouldn't be able to see it because of my own white privilege. Like I would just treat every cop with the same way, and now like when I see a cop now, I look and I'm just like, I get not scared for my own life, but for anyone else around me, because that's my white privilege. It's like I never have to fear for my own life around a cop. But now that I'm looking at all these resources, I do look around to see if anyone else is uncomforted by that presence because of how long they've brutalized the Black community.
Yeah.
So.
And it's like the crazy thing is, right? Like I will be in the presence of cops, right? Or I'll drive past a cop car and I'll like, for an instant, I'll be like, ooh, like, let me like, I don't know, like fix myself over something weird. And then I'm like, what are you scared for? Like, why are you afraid? It's like I'm trying to like, not like, I don't know how to say this. It's like, I'm like, I feel like the fear is viewed as irrational, right, by a large group of people. So whenever I experience that fear for myself, I'm always trying to like, well, not all cops are bad. Like, you're fine. Like, nothing's gonna happen to you. Like the chances of you like being pulled over and like brutalized or attacked or killed in a police encounter are slim to none, right? But I think about it, right? And then it's like the fact that I even have to consider for a fact that in any encounter with a police officer, I may lose my life is like, it's just the fact that I have to consider that at all speaks volumes about the issues that are going on in this country, right? Mm-hmm. Like I shouldn't have to engage that kind of thought process, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's different things too. Like I always feel self-conscious when I wear my hood up in public, especially at night, because I don't want to look a certain way, right? When I'm walking alone at night and someone's in front of me, I'll always slow down my pace, make sure there's a good distance between me and that other person, because I don't want nobody, getting the wrong idea. Like, I don't know, it's little things like that, like always having to adjust behaviors so I don't come across as, I don't know, like a predator or a monster, just so that I don't like possibly lose my life, or I don't know.
Yeah, I've never had that thought process,
Yeah, I never
it's like white people like us, Caleb, that like, we'll never understand that. Yeah. And then this are same like people that will minimize their struggle because they don't understand it, and so they try to minimize it because they don't want to believe that they have privilege for some reason. Yeah. Well, I mean, so they try to minimize that struggle, and then that shit gets internalized. Like you just said, Josh, is like, whatever everyone tells you, like you internalize and like, yeah, maybe not all cops are bad or whatever.
Yeah.
But you still have that fear.
Exactly. That doesn't change the way I feel, and that doesn't give it any less value or any less merit, right? Like the way you, like whatever feelings you have, like that's true to your own experience. You can't, like, no one else can like tell you the way you feel is wrong, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
How are they supposed to understand,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, like, with, like, if a cop pulls, like, behind me, like, I get a little nervous because, like, I'm afraid. Like, I'll adjust my speed downwards to, like, the speed limit or even a couple miles below the speed limit, and
Are
I
you
get
saying
that.
you drive over the speed
No,
limit?
I would never.
Good.
But like
God.
I'll be like I'll be a little nervous of like getting pulled over, but like I can't even imagine like how you feel with like if you do get pulled over,
Mhm.
like the fear of that you might like something worse that could happen to you, like beaten up. Like I can't even imagine like or even
Yeah.
death. Like I can't for like for just like a speeding ticket. Like I can't even imagine having that
Mhm.
fear. And I'm just like, because like of my
Exactly.
white privilege, like I don't have that like fear, and
Yeah.
like I want to understand that more. Well, because like I can never like feel it, but like I want to be able to like understand it and like
Understand.
Mhm.
get more educated on it, rather because like I didn't really have any idea of how
Mhm.
other people went because I know or felt like I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I'll,
just like, sorry.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, so like I was just saying that like, and it's like each encounter you never know what's gonna happen, right? Because like I'm sure George Floyd didn't think, when those four officers showed up to confront him, I'm sure he didn't think, that was gonna be like the last those are gonna be the last breaths he would ever take in
Mhm.
this world, right? It's like you never know. It could go wrong just like that. And it's like, that's why I have fear, right? Because you just never know if this is gonna be like, I don't know, like your last moments. I don't know.
Yeah, it was for something so small too.
Yeah,
I want to know
yeah,
how much that check was. How much
yeah.
that bad check was, because basically what they're saying is however much that check was worth is worth more than George Floyd's life.
Exactly.
That's what they're
Exactly.
saying. And also
Yeah,
like such other small things, like they killed a kid in his own yard for playing with a toy gun.
yeah.
When they were talking, they found the like audio tapes where they're talking about it. It's like, oh, that's a kid, and they're like, oh, that might be a toy gun, but they still shot him. You know.
Exactly. Exactly. Breonna Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it was Breonna Taylor that was murdered in her own home. Her own home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like, what, if you can't even be safe in the privacy of your own, your own space, it's just like, where will I never not be afraid? Like, where will I never not have to worry about being disrespected in such a
Mm-hmm.
way?
Oh, also Caleb and Josh, actually, what you guys were saying about like police interactions in cars, like I don't drive, so I can never like understand that. But even if I did, like I was watching Just Mercy, which they made it available free now, so you guys should watch it.
Hmm.
Um, and it's about like the death row penalty and how it was used especially against like the black community, and it was based in Alabama. Um,
Hmm.
but there are also some like interactions with police while they were in their own cars, like a couple of them at the very beginning of the movie. One of the protagonists, he had put his hands up on the wheel while the cop was approaching the car, and it's like I would have never thought to do that. you know
Hmm.
I don't think they teach that in like driver's ed.
Yeah.
And then with the other protagonist, when he had his own interaction with police in his own car, they were telling him to get out, and he was like saying like, okay, when he had to put his hands down to reach for his buckle, he had to say it to them like, I am unbuckling and stuff like that, because they don't know like the racist fear that the
Exactly.
police have when they put their hands down. And it's like these things I would never like think to do, because
Yeah.
that's my privilege.
Yeah, man. And
Yeah.
it's like the system is built to oppress us. It's like the whole prison industrial complex is
Mm-hmm.
literally racist on so many levels. What was it? It was Bill Clinton. who started the 3 strikes and you're out with the whole war on drugs thing. Like, and it was like on your 3rd criminal offense for like holding marijuana, like you would be like sentenced like super heavily or something. And like that whole entire movement was literally targeting Black people and Black communities, because it was Black communities where, you know, drug use and whatnot was most prominent, right? And it's like the war on drugs was, in a sense, a war on Black people, right? And then you have these communities who are heavily policed and heavily, and in turn, heavily brutalized by the police because they're like a certain race, right? And it's just like every level of the system is like worked to just disrespect and, I don't know, disenfranchise Black bodies. And this has been happening over time and over time. And it's just like, I don't know, things had to reach this point, you know, like things had to, this is the boiling point, right? Like, say what you want about the riots, say what you want about these cities being burned down and looted and ransacked. And it's just, at the end of the day, all you have, like, this event itself forces you to take a look at everything, right? Because this had to happen for a reason. What is America doing wrong? Where is this injustice happening? Where does it end, right? Because it can't keep on going like this. And these riots are literally the physical manifestation of years of disrespect and wrongful death and injustice. And I don't know, you just can't, I don't know.
Yeah, when you're talking about like the war on drugs, I also like, I read recently that like the CIA sold crack to Black and Hispanic communities. And then just so they could mass incarcerate them, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that that is a documented like event
Thing.
and we completely, and people still cover it up and like completely ignore it as if it like never happened. That's crazy to me, you know?
Yeah.
It's like one of those things where you're like, that should be like all over the news for like centuries.
Exactly. Everyone, like everyone should know this stuff, but people don't. People don't, and that's the crazy thing. Like this, like, and a side note, this is why I think the American educational system is failing us, because this is like the type of racism we should be really learning about and really exploring and breaking down. Right? It's important to learn about the civil rights movement. It's important to learn about slavery and the emancipation and civil rights that were awarded to oppressed communities, but it's also important to learn about the oppression going on in our society today, right? Like there is this amazing documentary called 13th by Ava DuVernay, and she breaks down all of the institutionalized racism going on in this country today, and how you can trace it back to the 13th Amendment, right? In which it basically, it brought the emancipation of slaves, except for one little clause they snuck in about how you are basically viewed as a free person unless you are a criminal, unless you are charged and sentenced in court of law. And basically what you saw happening after the emancipation is that recently freed slaves were literally charged on the littlest of offenses and thrown right back into the prison system, which was basically another form of slavery, right? And that idea has followed us to this very day, right? We see Black and brown bodies thrown into the prison system.
And they can't vote, so they can't change the policies.
Exactly. And it's like these, I don't know, like these things are literally just meant to break down Black communities, right? Because who more than anyone is getting is being thrown in jail, right? Is being thrown in jail. Black men, right? And you are literally removing Black fathers from the home, Black mothers as well in certain cases. You are breaking down the African American family structure. It's like the more you look at it, it's like the more you find ways in which Black people are just being disrespected and kept in perpetual powerlessness by a government that's supposed to protect us and enforce justice. And it's dumb. It's stupid.
And like we see it all the time. Let's say hypothetically that white men are charged just as often as Black men are charged. Okay, let's say hypothetically. Still, we see it all the time that like the Black community gets sentenced for like longer years in jail than a white man does for the same crime. We see that all the time because they want to keep them in this modern day slavery. And so they, because they can't vote, they don't want them to change the policies because like people at the top of the food chain, like police and authority, they like that power. They want to stay there as long as possible. That's why here in America, like career politicians is like way more prominent here than like in any other country. Like it's still very prominent in other countries, but like in America, like you can really make a living off of being a career politician, and that's crazy.
It shouldn't be like it's just.
And it's just serving your own self-interest,
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I heard this one case where some guys or like a Black guy, he walked into a store and then he stole, I think it was like only like a $30 backpack, or in some case, and he got arrested and he ended up getting like a life sentence for just for stealing like a $30 backpack. You get a life sentence out of that, and like I can't even fathom like
how just stuff like that is allowed to pass is just ridiculous.
And I should know his name, and I regret not knowing his name, but like it's just like the most ridiculous things happen like that. And there's this, I hate to throw statistics because we talked earlier about it, but like America, out of the entire population of the world, it's like 3/4, like 70% or more, around 70% are incarcerated, like the population, if that makes sense.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like out of the entire world, it's like 70% of the incarcerated people come from the United States alone. And that's like
crazy.
Like how our justice system is just like wrong. And I don't even know where, like I don't even know.
Yeah, that's one of the best things to come out of like legalizing marijuana as well, is so that we can get the people who are wrongly convicted in the first place out of jail.
Yeah.
It's like I hate the white people who are like out there like demanding legalizing marijuana just for like, just because they want to get high and shit like that. Like it's so much bigger than that, like for medical reasons and for mass incarceration as well.
And then another thing that's flawed with our like jail system too is that private organizations or like private corporations get paid for like a certain percentage of their jail cell being filled, or like their jail facility being filled. Like the government is paying people to stay in jail. So like police officers police officers are going to then like find stupidest reasons for people to go to jail, and then I feel like then that even targets Black people even more.
Also, I've heard about this from my class in fall semester. about the education system in urban communities, mainly Black communities, actually, in Philadelphia, where they decide how many jail cells are going to be in a jail when they newly build it. You want to know how they decide that number? Based upon the grades in elementary school of the communities around them.
What?
So the jail cells are an equivalent of how well the education system is doing. And we all know that the education system fails in urban communities.
That's so messed up.
Where like Black and Hispanic communities, like, you know, usually stay because of like oppression and like economic injustice in general. So they stay in these poor education systems, and then they make room in their own jails for those people because that's what they expect of them, you know? And that's how they're going to target them in the police department, you know?
Let's not talk about prison retention rates. The opportunities for people who have been imprisoned to rejoin, you know, the community and really get their bearings back is not enough is being done. Not enough is being done.
So much end up homeless. I feel like way more than people who come back from the military as well. Like everyone talks about the military end up being homeless and how we need to help them, but also people that were wrongly convicted or just jailed for an inappropriate amount of time. You know, they end up homeless just as much or to a higher degree.
Exactly. And then it just comes back to sorry.
No, you can go.
You go, Caleb.
I was just going to say, like, what if you just like mess up like accidentally too, like, because everyone messes up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And then like you're in jail for like 2 years, maybe 2 to 5 years, and then like that can just mess up like your entire life too.
Yeah, I feel like we only kind of skimmed over like riots and protesting as well, like the morality of it, of people saying that like violence is not the answer, but like that's the thing that we're also protesting, is that violence is not the answer against our own lives. Like people who are sworn to protect us, you know, they're resorting to very violent approaches, even against peaceful protests that are protesting against violent approaches. It's like the irony within all of it is just insane, you know? Yeah. And that the same chief of police will like kneel with the protesters and be like, we hear you, we're with you. And then like an hour later tear gas them because of, you know.
Yeah, like what?
It's like, it's insane.
Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's insane. And like, isn't there like 40 plus cities that had like curfews as well? Yeah. It's like, where was that when we had the whole pandemic at its peak?
Exactly.
We needed that more then than we do now.
That's what I'm saying. It's like no one has like brain cells, you know? It's like like the brain cells just aren't working for some people. Oh, it's like, what's the point of like our prisons, right? Because I feel like they're just designed, like the original intention was supposed to be a place of rehabilitation, right? We were supposed to take these people who were not operating well within society, put them in a place where they could re-educate and, you know, acquire tools that would allow them to actually fit in to the society and be better members of the community, right? And that sounds really nice. That sounds very nice and a very productive use of money and time. But instead, what we see happening here is that people are thrown in jail to rot and to be exploited and to be monetized off of, to be used for profit. And it's just, it's like a waste. It's just a complete waste of resources. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. You aren't helping these people at all. You're just making their lives worse.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to see what you guys have heard about like government or police department responses to the protest, because it has look to have, I mean, as much as there is still police brutality against these peaceful protests, it does seem to have worked in some communities. Like I did see in Flint, Michigan, and I think it was Camden, New Jersey. The police departments were like walking like arm in arm with the protesters and like, you know, very united front about it. I don't know if they've done like direct changes to their own department,
police departments,
but I mean, it's performative, and that's the thing is like, I like the sentiment behind what they did in DC. In DC, where they made Black Lives Matter Boulevard, and painted Black Lives Matter down there, and like, I especially like the fact that it's leading up to, you know, Trump's White House, and that he has to know that's right out there. You know, I like that sentiment, but at the same time, it's a lot of the protesters have seen it as being very performative, and they're still wanting and demanding actual policy changes instead of just like, you know, renaming a street. And so
okay, like that whole thing with the police department in Flint, Michigan, like my feelings on that is just like we shouldn't. And here's the thing, I always feel conflicted about this because I'm always like, we shouldn't applaud people for doing the bare minimum. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
That police department should have been like standing up. Like it shouldn't have taken this for them to be like, oh, like we're on your side now. You know, like I don't know why. Like, and
that's every company as well. That's every company on social media.
Yeah. It's like you guys should have been writing for us from the beginning. Like, and even like, you know, people on social media who are not African American or Black and are, you know, saying things and doing things, and then, you know, we're out here like, oh, thank you for like being understanding or whatever. And it's just like, I get that, right? Like, it's important to show appreciation. At the same time, it's like, I feel like you guys should have been doing that from, you know, a long time ago. So it's just like, you know, like, why are we applauding fish for swimming? You know?
Yeah.
It's just like, and then, oh man, I was gonna say something else. What you said, Titus, but I forgot. Oh yeah. Like all this stuff at the end of the day is just like performative. Like it's all just to maintain an image or to elicit a certain response or to make people not seem as bad as they ought to be. And it's like, I don't know. It's just like, and I guess the real question that comes from stuff like this is, how do we create meaningful, sustainable change, right? Like, how do we actually have an impact versus just making a statement on Twitter or, you know, having your PR team write up a, you know, notes apology for you and like putting it on your Instagram? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you actually like do stuff like this? Like start a conversation. How do you change people's ideologies and really create unity and solidarity between groups of people who have nothing in common with each other? I shouldn't say nothing in common, but don't experience the same struggles as members of another community do.
Did you guys see what Lego did?
I didn't.
Lego not only donated 10 million, but they also took all of their police related like sets out of stores.
Really?
It took them all out. And so like that's a cool statement. It can still be seen as performative, but
like
I feel like that's more of a long-term thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like we actually want to see you stick in it for the long run. We don't just want you to be here while it's trending and while the news cycle is going on. Is still on it, because we know that after the news cycle, Trump is going to try to avoid all topics of it. You know, he may be using George Floyd's name now, but he won't be once the news cycle doesn't care about it. And so,
and then I think the Michael Jordan like shoes, they're donating $100 million over the next 10 years. So that's like also a long run too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But then
then
people out here who donating like $50. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Virgil.
Yeah. That dude. Oh my god.
He like posted it. Like, it's not just the fact that he donated $50. It's that he posted it to like get that reaction from people.
Wait, I didn't hear about that.
Oh, is Virgil? He's like an art, like a really high up art director at Louis Vuitton.
Okay.
Yeah, a black man himself. As far as like government approaches go, like I've seen a lot on Twitter about great suggestions on like long-term and short-term steps that we can take towards like systemic changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, what I've seen, and you guys can fill me in as well on what you guys have seen, but LAPD has defunded their own police department by like 5-10 million, which is a start. But at the same time, LAPD is one of the most funded police departments in the country.
Yeah.
And guess how much 5 million is of their original budget? It's 5%. So it's one of those things. Is like you have to look at the context of the number. You have to look at the context of the number. Yeah. So like, listen, I'm not gonna like talk down on that number still. Like, it's a good start, but we have to keep carrying that momentum towards better policy changes as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a great thread from a literal like researcher and statistician about what changes are actually going in the right direction and what changes are just going to do nothing. Like, they researched about body cams and how that is basically unproductive and won't do much.
And doesn't do anything.
Yeah, basically. And like, I can send you guys the link to that later, but basically they're also saying that there needs to be more groups within communities that are able to take up roles that the police have, because we're really, as a society, we're putting a lot on the police. Like, they fill in a lot of roles in communities that they aren't qualified to. And so in areas in like Oregon, they've already done this for like years, I think, is that they've actually responded. They've had like first responders that are mental health like professionalists respond to those cases instead of police who literally have guns. And it's like, that's not going to calm down anyone's anxiety. So like, we do need better like organizations and resources within our communities that aren't just cops.
Yeah.
And well, of course, we need to continue defunding them as well. And then there's also 8can'twait.org.
Yes.
And you can look at and they have a great resource where you can look at each city and see like what they've done. And it's like, I think they should also make it clear that while these 8 can't wait, there also still needs to be more done in the long term. You know, like, these are just basic steps that need to be taken. Like, Philadelphia is already, even before this, has done like 7 of those 8, you know? But like, this is just the start. This is like you said, like, we need to be doing more than the bare minimum.
I saw this one video a while ago too. I forget which country it is, but they showed a frame of a different country. I forget what it is or what country it is. And then one video of New York, a store in New York, and a store in this other country. This guy came in with a knife and was like, "Oh, I'm going to rob you." The police there in the different country approached him without any guns. They calmed him down. He put the knife down and everything was fine. And like, they de-escalated it. Like, they were like, just put the knife down. You don't have to do this. Just like calmly put it down and it's all going to be okay. But then the New York store, within like 2 seconds of a man walking in with a knife, the same instance, they charged, like 4 cops charged him with like guns and tasers and stuff, tackled him to the ground and like handcuffed him like instantly. And then it was just like, it showed the difference between like the system is different in different countries.
Yeah, policing.
Yeah.
Especially in Europe, like most European countries don't even have cops with guns, you know? And like in Iceland, no cop has any gun. And they've banned guns there. And in the history of Iceland, there's only been 1 shooting case. And it was a very minor. Like, it wasn't too terrible. I mean, it's still terrible, but you know, it still was able to. They still managed to de-escalate it, and so like I don't think Second Amendment changes are going to be possible very soon. But we need to start getting people aware that there are alternatives to what we think is security and protection.
Yeah.
That, you know, we need to show them the alternatives that actually have worked and make people feel safe.
Yeah, like there are plenty of other countries around the world, and forgive me, I haven't done my research, but like I'm sure there are multiple other countries around the world who have gotten better results by engaging and enacting different systems that, you know, don't brutalize Black people or generally just, I don't know, just don't do the right thing. Like, I don't know, there's just better ways of going about this, but people are afraid of change.
I feel like the news has definitely painted a bad image of them as far as riots go.
Yeah.
Like in Minneapolis, it definitely was a riot at first, but like they made it, the way that police reacted to it in every single other city is as if the same effect is going to take place in their own cities. And I feel like they just should have like actually talked to the organizers to make sure that shit wouldn't happen, you know?
Yeah,
exactly.
Like the organizers aren't going to shut you out necessarily. Like they, you know, you still have the ability to talk things through, you know? Like what everyone's saying about violence isn't the answer, and you know, you can have a peaceful protest and just talk things out. Like it goes both ways. It goes both ways with the police.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I'm not gonna like stand up against like violent reactions necessarily either. Like as long as it's like not getting in like anyone's harm, and like I feel like what most people are doing in like southern states about like trying to tear down like Confederate statues and stuff like that. Like that should have happened a while ago, you know?
Yeah,
like I just feel like people should expect that if people keep getting ignored, and you know, this aggression is going to build up until, you know, it's explosive. You know, like this, you should have seen this coming, basically.
I agree. And like I feel like, you know how like Derek Chauvin and the other 3 police officers were like actually given a fair sentence and charged with murder for their crimes. I don't know if that result would have been the same if people had not been rioting, if people had not been protesting. Like, not to, I don't know. It's a very slippery slope, right? Because on one hand, it's like I feel like the natural reaction is just to be like, violence isn't the answer. And like, you know, you shouldn't burn down cities and like loot, you know, whatever. But also at the same time, like what you said, Titus, like if you're like, I mean, in a way, if you really want to think about it, we were like, you gave us violence first. Like to every reaction we tried to give with peace and understanding and open dialogue, you responded with more death and more murder and more blood. And it's just like, well, what else do you expect? If like people are obviously going to get fed up and get, you know, violent.
I was watching this Tupac interview that like made a great like analogy for it. It's like, imagine you're like, there's 2 rooms, okay? One with like the Black community or like any other minority as well, and then there's another room with like the whole white community and like the authority and like people like with high status. And that room with the high status people, they have a room full of food, and they're locking out the other room from being able to get in, and the other room doesn't have any food. And so at first it's just like, of course they're like the other room is just going to ask politely about, you know, trying to get in. Can we have food, just like politely. But our response, the white community and like the authorities, is just like, oh no, you're fine, you have your own food as well. There's no food for you here. And then they just like, basically ignore him and dismiss them. They have a dismissive response. But as the years goes on, like the pleas start getting less polite, and it becomes demands. It's like, yo, we need food now because people are starving. Of course they're gonna have that reaction, but they keep dismissing them, and then eventually people are gonna start picking the locks. People are gonna try to like ram through and start like invading the place. Like obviously it's gonna build up if you keep dismissing. And like Tupac put it better, because I'm just like, secondhand saying it, but like people should definitely go look up that interview when Tupac is talking about racial injustice. It's like, it's actually really, really well articulated as well, because people usually have like put this bad light on like rappers as like they're violent as well and shit like that. But like that's like I've always seen Tupac as a very articulate person, but because he's from like the ghetto, I guess people just look at him as though he's like, I don't know,
a stereotype.
Yeah, uneducated.
Yeah.
Wait, Josh, I have a question. I hope this doesn't like come straightforward or anything, but like have your parents when you were younger ever talked to you about how to react to police and stuff?
It was never like, they were like, they sat me down and they were like, hey, son. But it was more like an understanding that was ingrained. I don't know how to articulate it. Like, there was definitely like, not even just from my parents, but I would say from extended family, my aunts and my uncles, there was always like this message that like you had to be careful around police figures and you had to sort of take caution, and I think like it's just like, as growing up as a Black person, part of your education is always it's on some level like how to conduct yourself in a manner that won't make you seem threatening or won't make you seem less than, right? It's like, make sure you speak educated, make sure you carry yourself in a certain manner, make sure you're not being too loud or being too aggressive, or it's like that is how we are taught to exist within society by our parents and our figures, at least as far as I can say.
I don't know. I just find that like interesting, because like coming from like white privileged like household, that like never even like thought process or like came about. And it's like, it's wrong that you have to do that and stuff. Like that shouldn't be a thing that needs to be like taught.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like thinking about even in the future, like when I have children, like I'm gonna have to do that very same thing, right? Like I'm gonna have to sit them down. I'm gonna be like, hey, like I don't even know how I don't even know I'm gonna explain to them that like, just be like, it's not your fault, but just because of the way you were born, you are going to have to adjust your identity in almost any setting to be seen as a person of value and a person who is worthy of living. It is kind of crazy if you think about it, but yeah.
I've been reading some tweets from like mutuals on Twitter of like the first instance in their childhood where they realized that like racism was a thing, or just the very idea of race was a thing. And they're usually from like very aggressive or like violent cases with like, I don't know, neighbors or like white people in the community.
Yeah.
and shit like that. It's like, it's so sad that you have to learn from a young age that like people see you as a lesser,
Mm-hmm.
like that's something no child should hear at all.
Yeah.
No person should hear, of course, but it's also sad that children are.
Yeah. And I remember like in the 3rd grade, because I moved from like New York to New Jersey in the 3rd grade. And I remember like the first day I walked into like my 3rd grade class, and I was just like looking at all the faces and none of them looked like me. And I was like, boy, I sure do wish I was white. Like that sounds very like stupid, but like it's just, like stuff like that, right? Like the fact that I even had to like, I don't know, just not wanting to be different, I feel is something, I don't know, Black people encounter. At least as far as I know, it's something I encountered. And like I had a real rough time in high school as far as like ignorant people and like, and okay, and here's the thing, right? When I went to high school, I wanted to like be in law enforcement. I wanted to be a forensic scientist. So I joined this law enforcement and public safety academy. And basically it was like, you got like a similar education to someone who wasn't in wasn't in a specialized program, and you just had extra classes and activities tagged on to your day-to-day schedule. Now, here's the thing. Almost every single child in that class was racist or offensive on some level or at some point. There were multiple instances in that classroom in which I felt uncomfortable. I felt,
Shit.
I'm gonna say targeted, but like literally I was bullied by this one kid who, like one time he showed me a picture of like this Black criminal and he asked me if it was my dad. And that was like, that's like one of the worst things anyone's ever said to me. In that very same classroom, I remember one time we were watching this video and there was this Black woman on screen, and that same kid like referred to that woman as a monkey in the class. And like, oh my God, it's just like stuff like that. And it was in a law enforcement and public safety program. And like,
I want to know how many of them became cops and shit.
Yeah. Like, oh my God. And it's not even that. It's like people making ignorant jokes, people making racist jokes, people making tone deaf comments, tone deaf jokes. It was like, oh my God. And I'm just like, those are the kind of kids who wanted to join the law, like, wanted to join the police force. I was like,
that's crazy.
Oh, did you see David Guetta, like the EDM DJ?
What did David Guetta do?
Oh my gosh, he was like on the roof of some building in NYC doing like a concert or something. And because of everything going on, he decided that he needed to like make a song, because that was his way of like expressing his feelings, I guess. He needed to make a song about the matter. And he was like, with everything going on with George Floyd, I decided I was going to make a song. So this one's for him. Shout outs to his family. And it's like this super upbeat, like EDM type song with like that sampled like a Martin Luther King speech and shit. And I was like, my God, that's the most tone deaf thing I've ever seen.
David.
Like, it's good. Like, it can come from good intentions, of course, but tone deafness is still a problem.
Sometimes you just gotta shoot your PR person a quick text. Like, is this okay?
Did you see the like quote unquote Instagram influencers? I hate using that term so much, but
ew.
Like, yeah.
Like influence me. Yeah. I'm
Influence.
so influenced.
But like
what?
There was like videos of them like going to like protests and stuff and like posing in front of like like policemen and stuff. And
Oh my god.
right when they like took the picture, they left, and then it was just like, and they were like posting it to like Instagram and stuff, and it'd be like, "Hi, protested." Like they would like draw us, like have a sign, and like hold up a sign and stuff, and act like they were protesting and stuff, and it was just like the most ridiculous like thing that I've ever seen. Like why?
Josh, I know this might be stirring the pot with you, but did you see what Kanye did?
He donated money, I believe.
Yeah, he was at the protests as well, but the specific donation was, well, he donated to charities, but he also set up a college fund for George Floyd's daughter.
Yes. Well, I suppose a leopard can change his spots. I don't know. I still think he's terrible.
I feel like we can't ignore all of his other responses, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like this was a good response because it wasn't really a response. It was just like appropriate actions. You know, he wasn't trying to make a performative thing out of it with like posting to social media or anything. It wasn't even, I don't think it was him posted about the donations either. It was just like another source that found out about it. So I think that's like good steps to take, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yay.
So this one instance, he did like an all right thing. Yeah. I guess final statement, we can just say like research, educate yourselves, donate, don't be stubborn about the issue, and like, you know, try to look at all sides. And I mean, it's not like a political thing. I think that's the most important thing. This isn't like Black Lives Matter is not a political thing. It's a human rights thing. You know?
Yes, exactly.
So that's the way everyone should look at it.
And then just starting a conversation like this is a way that you can help as well. Everything or every little thing can make a difference as well.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be massive. Just help out. Even if it's donating like $10 or something, even though it's not that much money, it's still something.
I agree. Donate, educate yourself. Do what you can. Do what is within your power to make a difference and to make change, right? Like, you don't have to have a million followers on Instagram or YouTube. You don't have to be Black. You don't have to be white. You don't have to be, it's like Titus said, it's a human rights issue. And everyone has to do their part in uprooting the racist ideologies that have taken over this country.
Mm-hmm. And I think education is a key thing too. Educate yourself. All right, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming in.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Of course, Caleb.
Always a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I guess. See ya.